Okay, welcome everyone. We're starting a new series on personality traits. How to get the traits that we want to develop them properly. Now, to start this, we have to understand a little bit the structure of the human being. We have a structure, we're not going to know what we're dealing with. So let's begin. When we look at a person physically, and it'll be corresponding on the spiritual level too, we see there's a head, there's the torso, the middle section, and the lower section. Now, there is a great debate of what is the king of the human being. Is it the head, which is on top, or is it the heart, which is in the middle? All right, let's try to understand this. Now, in the Zohar, in the Kabbalah, it says that if you take the word in Hebrew for mind, it's called moach. Heart is called lev, and the lower body is run by the organ that's called the liver, called the kaved in Hebrew. If you take the letters of these words, you go from moach, mind, to lev, to heart, then to the word kaved, liver, it spells the word melech. And therefore the Zohar says that a person that goes from their mind to their hearts and to their physical expression, which the liver is in charge of that. It is deemed by our sages as being full of blood, representing the physical elements. If you go from mind, heart, to liver, melech, your king. That's the flow. If you go backwards, your desires, your blood, your yearnings of physical nature, they dictate. You go from that to your heart, to your head. It spells the word kalem, which is the word for a disgrace. You become a disgrace. So according to that, it would seem that the mind is the king. But that's not so simple, because the sages tell us that the heart pumps the blood also to the mind. So in a certain sense, the heart is really the king. It provides the nourishment. In the center, as being everything comes out from the heart. So which is true? It's a bit of a both. We have to understand how this works. The main part of the human being, where we have the action of building ourselves, is in the heart, in the yearnings of what we want. And this is what the sages tell us, that the heart has the right side, the left side, pushing towards good, pushing towards maybe the opposite. Your deciding, so to speak, is in the heart. The main aspect of the person is considered here what he wants, so to speak, what the heart yearns for. And on a spiritual nature, there are different parts of the soul that we talk about. The three we're going to talk about today are the nefesh, the lowest part of the soul, which is what comes to reside in the body, which is in charge of the physical things. We could connect that with the liver, so to speak. There is the second level of soul called the ruach, the wind, which is the connector, so to speak. That's connected with the heart. And then you have what's called the neshama, the breath, which is already connected to the infinite, and that's connected with the mind. The main aspect of our human situation is in the ruach, the wind in the heart. And therefore, the way to look at it is like this, the sages tell us, is that the heart and the ruach is the main component of the human being. The lower part, the nefesh, or the physical, the kaved, is below the level of human beings, and that is our job to elevate. The neshama, the soul, which is connected with the mind, its goal is to impart its more lofty spiritual root on the person itself. So really, your torso is where the main action is, so to speak. And that has to elevate the lower part of you. And the mind has to give it direction. Therefore, what you want is really, in a certain sense, what you are. As the sages say, Rahman Ali Baboy, that God wants our heart. The mind has to go and use its analytical ability to tell you what you should want. Once you could take from your mind and put onto your heart what you should want, the heart, what it really wants, is going to dictate. And that's why the heart very often causes the mind to be deluded with rationalizations. Because when you want something, you find ways to tell yourself that's what you should get. So the goal is to take the head, understand what we have to understand with our minds, put it into our heart that we should want it, and then that wanting is going to be the king of the whole system. It's going to affect the lower part, the physical part, what you're actually going to do. It's going to affect how you're going to think and try to get what you want. But it's almost impossible to argue with someone and say, hey, you don't really want this. People, when they want something, they find so many rationalizations to get it. And therefore, we have to work on what the heart wants. Now, let's understand this a second. In the mind, there are different components. And we'll explain it as we go, but what's called the Chokhmah and the Bina, different parts of the mind, how our thinking processes work. But those are not really the deepest part of the mind. The deepest part of the mind is called the Keter, the crown. Now, a crown is not really in the person, it sort of sits above. Okay? It's a connection to a higher dimension. And the highest part, what the crown is what you want. Okay? And therefore, even in the mind can think, what is it I want? And once the mind has that concept and clarifies it, it has to put that into the emotional level of what the heart wants. Okay? So it's not two separate situations. There really is, in the mind, the thinking process, the root of it is really what I want. But I have to take that from the thought world and bring it into the heart world, okay? The emotional world. And this is also the lineup of the same system. There is what's called machshava, thought. There is what we either call speech or feelings, emotion. That's here. And then there's the action, what comes out. So when I go and I tell I think in my mind, this is what I should want, and I can feel it, it can come out to action. And that's the process we have to start now. So what is it that a person really wants? Well, they want, if they do not develop a refined decision in their mind, they'll want whatever it is that the limitation of their minds want. So a little kid wants candy. That's what he wants. The baby just wants its pleasures. As the mind develops, the mind has the ability to impart the wanting of the heart to change. Okay? So people in their earlier stage of their life want physical things. They want pleasure. Now, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is fairly simple, because wanting physical pleasures, you realize it's limited. It has a process that when you get full, you don't want it anymore. If you ate a steak and you loved it, it was delicious, but you're full, and I say, here's another steak, enjoy, you say, I don't want it, because it has no value. The entire system of physical pleasure is limited. It is based on full, empty, yearning. Full, don't want anymore, then I become empty and I want it again. That's the process. So physical pleasures are limited pleasures. Not only that, okay, you can spend your whole life getting physical pleasures, but first of all, you might not get them. And if you get them, they're very temporal in terms of their happiness that you get from them, because you have them now and then disappear afterwards because you're full. Not only that, but let's say this guy is the one in a million, gets all of his pleasures, so to speak, then he dies. What does he take with him? Nothing. Not only that, but the sages tell us nobody dies, not even the biggest person of all pleasure, with half of his desires, because when you get it, you want more. So the physical desires that you want is sort of a dead end. And what you really do want instead is to have the physical desires be a stepping stone only for spiritual pleasures. Now, let me show you how that's obviously better. If a person goes and says, I love hamburgers. Okay, great. And the guy has a son who's causing him a lot of trouble. And I say, listen, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Jones, would you trade your son for a life supply of hamburgers? No known person would say yes. Why? Because you can't compare them. Love and the pleasure of love is completely qualitatively different than the pleasure of physical. Love pleasures and pleasures that are of a spiritual nature are not bound by time and space. They don't work through this process of limited and then I don't want it anymore. They go through a process of endlessness. Now, with getting into somewhat of a deeper religious understanding of the moment, the truth is, it's hard to imagine for us, but the greatest pleasure is to experience the infinite. When you ask people, what do you want? They say, well, it's not that I want the hamburger. I want the happy feeling I get from these physical pleasures. So whatever you're going to get that's going to make you happier and feel more content, that's going to be the greater desire of a person. Okay? So when I say to a person, well, you could have all the pleasures you want now. What do you want beyond that? So the person will say love. I'll say, great. Give me some other words for it. They'll say unity, connection, transcendental experience. What they're really saying, in other words, is experiencing the infinite, experiencing God. Hard to understand how those two are the same, but these are different words for God, because what you're really experiencing is experience of something beyond, something infinite, something that makes you feel transcendental to the point of feeling complete pleasure and basking in that experience of oneness. So a person, really in a certain sense, should want to chase those types of pleasures. Now, I'm going to take it out of the context of religiosity in a second and just to explain this in terms of what terminology will be suitable for everyone. If you say that a person wants to feel wholeness, wants to feel not just they got their physical pleasures, but the happiness that they get from feeling good about themselves. Because if you notice, the definition of happiness in our world is a misnomer. The pursuit of happiness means it's a thing you can pursue and get. You can't. Happiness is a byproduct of fulfilling and living the way that you really should. So a person feels a momentary happiness when they chase down the physical thing they want to get, but it fades. When a person feels the expression of who they are, and they've now expressed their true selves, they feel a sense of wholeness, they feel happiness. That's called shleimus, wholeness. And that really is another way of saying what I said before on the spiritual and the religious understanding. A person who's not at that point of the religious terminology sits with him. Think that what you want to get is the experience of yourself being whole. Being content with what you are and who you are, expressing all of your possibilities and capabilities. That experience is the pleasure you should want. The truth is, though, for the religiously inclined, what that really means is you're expressing your reflection of godliness in the world. I don't want to get into that too much right now, but that's really what it means. Meaning that a person, really what lasts forever, what's infinite in a person is his expression that he is of God. That's his experience that's eternal. That's called his soul, his or her soul. Okay? So therefore, what your mind now wants to put into your heart is that I want to express what I really am. I want to have all of my different midot, my traits, be able to work on full cylinder. Okay? To express what I'm about, to control myself where I want to, and I really deep down know that I want to, and to express myself when I should. And that expression of the human being is called shleimus, wholeness. It is a person being true to what they are, which in the religious sense really is experiencing the deeper part of themselves, which is connected to the infinite. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is get the ratzon, the will, use our minds to redirect what our heart wants. Our heart wants things that make us feel good, make us feel pleasure, make us feel happy. But we grew up as little kids who had these little pleasure-seeking nature with our small minds. Now we got bigger minds. So take the idea and say to your heart, hey, chasing after, wanting just honor for people to look at me and say, oh, you're so great, or to get the pleasure of all physical pleasures, or to get the car that I can keep up with the Joneses, whatever. That's not really going to give me the real experience of happiness, but expressing who I am, that's what I want. Okay? So what first thing is I want to express and be able to be a whole person. All of myself, I will be able to experience, express, get in touch with that deeper part of myself that's hidden over in layers that are not really the real me. And you think about it, it's fairly obvious. When a child, we like, our pleasures as a kid, but then we get older. And the sages tell us when you're a child, you only get the lower part of your soul called the nefesh. And so you want those things. You get the higher part of your soul called the ruach, wind, the connection, when you become of age. You have mind. Hopefully, that's 13 for a boy, 12 for a girl. Sometimes people are a little slow bloomers. They might not even get the higher parts of their soul till later in life. But that's when you have the understanding. Your mind can now search for something deeper. Okay, so that is the beginning of this process. It is the ratzon, the head, and now I want something. And I realize that I want something deeper, and that is what is going to motivate me. Okay. Now, there's a problem, though. When you get to the parts of what you want, as I said, we all grew up as little kids who had a certain level of what we wanted. And now we have deeper layers of ourselves. And what we have to do is peel away the layers to get to the more essential person. Now, the way that works is like this. We have a soul that connects with the body. The body pulls one way, the soul pulls another way. But there is a point where there's an intermediary between the higher soul and the body. And that is called the nefesh bahamis. I guess the translation, but it had bad connotation in English, would be called the animal soul. I think without the bad connotation, what that really means is the part of us that is not the divine. It functions as a living creature, but does not have the higher godly aspect. Unfortunately, in the world today, many people believe that's all they are. They believe they're an animal. So they're really not going to move out of level one, which is getting my pleasures, because that's all they believe they are. The mind has not affected the heart yet. But what happens in reality is that the soul connects to the body, and it connects through what's called the blood. Now, what that means exactly, in the Kabbalah, it seems to be it's the higher percentage of the blood, which Aryeh Kaplan, great Kabbalist and scientist, said that's referring to the blood. That's the impulses of the brain. But however that works, there's a connection between the soul to the higher elements of the blood, and the blood that goes to the whole body and is constantly giving life and oxygen to the body. And what it connects to is, before we talk about the divine soul, there's a life force, the Nefesh Bahamis. And in that is the roots of your traits. Now, what is the roots of your traits? That works based on the 4 what's called fundamental elements in this world. This is not the periodic chart, so don't get nervous. But this is a deep, deep wisdom. I've heard physicists talk about this, talking about the four different central theories in terms of gravity, and you know. But whatever it is, the mystics told us that there's 4 conceptual ideas here. One is fire, okay, and the opposite is water, and they're pulling in different directions. There is wind, air, which is a connector, which moves the things. And then there is earth that receives. Okay? These 4 systems have their roots in the deeper mystical wisdoms too. Okay? That's tied in with the 4 letters of God's name. Okay? And there's a process here of fire, water, or water, fire, wind connection, and earth. The traits that are embedded in the life force, Nefesh Bahamis, come from these 4 different elements. And therefore they have a potential for a negative or a positive. Fire, on one hand, can be very bad. It could be burning up and rising, and I am the most important thing, and it's haughtiness, and it's anger. The fire burns inside of them, in us, and it causes this flame of anger. Water, and the negative, could just be pleasure. When you imagine a place in your mind that you want to go to, that all your desires are there. If you close your eyes, you're going to see there's always water in that vision. I don't care if you're in the desert. If you're in the desert, there's a stream, there's something. Because water is expansion. It makes pleasures grow. Okay? So in the life force, Nefesh Bahamis, fire and water potentially have this negative component. There's a way to turn it to good. If the water is the pleasure of this wisdom of expansion in a positive way, call it holy pleasures for lack of better terms right now, or pleasure for wisdom, or I know good pleasures, holy pleasures. We even have them in this physical world. So then that component can be used to good. In fire, same thing. If fire is burning up, rising, and it's the element that rises up, and I want to get so connected to spirituality, to godliness, that I connect there fully. And actually, the Kabbalists say that then that fire actually creates humility. Okay. Now we have wind, air, negative, I'm boasting, I'm talking about how great I am. Or people that just chatter. Gossip. What are you talking? What are you spreading? Why? What's the pleasure? It's air in the negative. Air in the positive is going to be a connector. And then finally, there's earth. And earth in the negative is sadness, laziness, which is a byproduct of sadness. I just can't do anything on earth. Okay? The Nefesh Bahamis life force, which is constructed from these four elements, which are really rooted in the deepest mystical wisdom, in an expression of God's name in the holiest, highest system. When it comes down into this world and it meets that juncture of the Nefesh Bahamis, the life force, it has a potential for good or for bad. What is the good of the earth? What is a positive usage? So the great mystic Rav Chaim Vital says it's contentment with what you have. Now wait a minute. If the root of what you should yearn is yearning, you want ambition, I want to attain something, we redirected it. It shouldn't just be to lowly things, but I want to attain. I want to reach completion. I want to be the greatest. How does that jive with the ability to say I'm content? So I want to give one key that is the beginning of dealing with our traits. It's knowing ourselves. Because contentment with what you are is the deepest experience. The reason why we don't think it is because if you think what you are is this schnook on the couch who's doing nothing in life, then yeah, that's right. That's not what you should be content with. But if what you are is this incredible soul, this incredible being that is some unique reflection of godliness in the world, then you just want to be you. And that's the contentment. Contentment doesn't mean that you stay on a low level. Contentment means that you take the will of being your portion, which is so great. It's infinitely greater than your thinking. And you take that and you express it, you be content. And that's why the words in Proverbs is very strange. It says, Sone matnos yichyeh. Person who hates gifts will live. What do you mean? We all love gifts. Oh, come on, it's Mother's Day, it's Father's Day, it's my birthday. Everyone wants gifts. What does it mean? You hate gifts, that's when you live? What does that mean? What the sages are telling us is very, very deep. The sages are telling us like this. When you take the gift because you feel you are choser, you're lacking, you have this hole in your being that can never be fulfilled. I am a lacking. I'm a choser. Then I need gifts. Give me because I don't have anything. I got a hole in my pocket. The more money you put in, the more it goes out. That's the story I told you about Alexander the Great. It says he got to the garden, the gates of the Garden of Eden, and they wouldn't let him in. And he said, I'm the conqueror. I've conquered the whole world. I've used all my ambition to get everything that's possible. They said, you can't come in here. You have no entry into this. This is only the gate for the righteous. So he wanted something. He wanted as a memento, understanding of where he was. And the Talmud says he gave him a skull. It was an eye socket or a skull. And he weighed it. And the more gold he put on one side, he saw that the skull was always heavier. It can never be overcome. It can never be satisfied. He said, what is this? So a voice comes from the Garden of Eden, says, take earth and put it on the eye socket of this skull. And he does. And once he does, the thing doesn't weigh anything anymore. The gold and silver is much more full, heavier than the skull. So they say to him, this is the eyes of a person that can never be satisfied and satiated. So there's not enough you can give it. when you're not looking out for that other thing and you're looking inside, that's when you can be satiated. And that's really a very, very deep thing. And the Hebrew letter Aleph and Ayin. Aleph and Ayin are interchangeable sometimes. That's what the sages say. And they even learn the words out of Ayin to Aleph and Aleph to Ayin. And they almost sound the same. But Aleph has no sound. It's a spiritual. Ayin, which is hard to say. The sages tell us that. I mean, today in modern Hebrew, only the Sephardim really say the Ayin. 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 Ashkenazim, it's very light. Ayin. Sounds like Aleph. Aleph, Ayin. Ah. But they're different. Because Aleph is one. The word Aleph is the word Aluf, the great one, the master of the universe. It's godliness. It's the word Aleph, to learn like an ulpan, Aleph. If you spell it backwards, it spells the word Pele. You learn, you try to understand it, but you can't. It's a Pele. A Pele is a wonderment. It's beyond anything you could imagine. The Aleph is a Yud in the top, Yud in the bottom, a Vav in the middle. It's the high waters, low waters, and the Vav that connects it. And if you take the letters that constitute an Aleph, the Yud on top, the Yud on bottom, the Vav in the middle, it's the numerical value of 26, which is God's name. Because Aleph is godliness. Aleph is oneness. Ayin, which is the other sound, very similar, is the same as the word ayin, eye. The eye that looks out. The eye that sees what the other person has. The Aleph is the internal, when I see what is mine. The Ayin is the external, when I see what's yours. And that's why, even though they're interchangeable, they're completely different. If you look at the Hebrew word ani, with an ayin, it's ani, poor. With an aleph, it's ani, it's I. When I'm looking out and I can't be satiated because I'm not seeing myself, it's poor. When I'm seeing myself, then it's ani. It's seeing the self. And then it's content. Adam and Eve, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made for them kosnos or, clothing of skin. Originally they had what's called kosnos or, clothing of light. With an aleph, it is light. With a ayin, it's or, it's physicality with pores in your skin